In this video, I'm going to show you how to propagate a potato tuber by cutting up its eyes. So the eyes are these little tiny, they're kind of like a yellowish, whitish sort of spot on there. They're not the gray spots. You'll see gray spots on some potatoes and not on others. In this case, you can see where some of them are greening up just a little bit here, and we are getting ready to grow right there. So for this experiment, we want to see how much potato you actually need to be able to regrow a plant. So I've chosen 3 different sizes, a small, a medium, and a large. For our large and medium size, we're going to use this melon baller. And we're just going to go ahead and take this melon baller and we're going to scoop out a section and see what our size classes look like. So if you're going to start with your biggest one, find a spot where it's nice and open and you've got a big flat region where you can do that. And now I'm just going to kind of press and scoop. You could probably use like a big teaspoon and a little teaspoon for this, or whatever you've got on hand. So then now I've got this little eye here, and I've got this pretty decent sized chunk of growing tissue to go associated with that, and that's gonna be our large size. Our medium size is, we're still gonna use a melon baller, but here I'm gonna use the other size. So this ends up being about a teaspoon, and then this ends up being about half a teaspoon. I do believe, I'm not 100% sure. I'd have to check. Okay, here we go. So we're just going to kind of scoop, and then I end up with another nice little chunk. And you can see that the size difference isn't terribly huge, but it's significant enough that you can see a difference between the medium and the large, okay? And then for the small, I'm going to take my regular potato peeler, and it has this end that is actually designed to be able to scoop out eyes in general. So we're going to use this to get our small piece. And if you're doing this at home, I would go ahead and start with whatever big sized potato you can get out of this first, and then make your medium sized chunks, and then lastly just go through and whatever other eyes you can find, you can go ahead and cut out for the small one. So for that, I'm just going to kind of stab here a little bit and scoop out and under, and this is probably going to be the most flexible for the sizes, I guess. And then, okay, so here we go. Here is my tiny little tuber with an eye. Okay, so now we're going to see if you only need this much tissue to regrow potatoes, or this much tissue to regrow potatoes, or this much tissue to regrow potatoes. Okay, and you want to kind of let this set for a little while, because you can see in here, this potato is quite juicy, right? It's full of starch and water. And so we want to let this harden off a little bit I went for overnight. And then after overnight, oh, now that has soil on it. That's hilarious. I'm going to cut another one so we can do a good comparison on this. Okay, here we go. We'll just cut this big one here. Okay, so here's what the fresh one looked like, where it's nice and white, and then here is what the one looks like that was just hardened off overnight. And so now I'm going to plant the ones that are hardened off. And to do this, usually you want to make the potato, when you're growing potatoes, you want to bury them at least twice as deep as they are tall, and then you want to keep mounding that soil up on top of it for a longer period of time until you get because as you stack up the soil, you're going to get more potatoes underneath. So at home, I like to grow these in a cardboard box. The cardboard box kind of disintegrates over the season. If you use a nice, thick, heavy, like banana box or produce box that's a little bit waxy, it'll last a little bit longer for you. And then by the end of the growing season, your box pretty much falls apart, which makes it really easy to harvest your potatoes. So now I've got my flat set up here. I've got large, medium, and small labeled. I also have an indicator here based on the size of the dividers of which one it is. So just in case the label happens to get lost, we still know what we're doing with this, right? And so now I'm just going to take these potato tubers and I'm going to plant them. These ones have to go, the large sized ones have to go almost the whole way to the bottom. Maybe I'll just plant them like this, and then we'll backfill with some soil. Let's do 5 in a row here. Okay, and then we're going to do 4 rows so that we have a sample size of 20 for our potato experiment. Okay, now these look really great. You know, they've hardened off overnight. They definitely each have an eye that looks like they're going to be ready to grow and turn into some lovely potatoes for you. This particular cultivar is the Burbank russet potato, which Luther developed. It was like his first major invention that helped him get enough money so that he could come out here to Santa Rosa and really start his breeding career. Okay. And we'll grow this here at the Luther Burbank Home and Gardens because this is Luther's potato. It's a pretty good potato. There's a lot of different kinds of potatoes out there. Okay, so now I'm just going to backfill that with some soil here. This is a product called Super Soil. It ends up being a little bit barky if you purchase it early in spring because they have a high volume demand, and so it isn't quite as broken down as if you get it like later on in the year. So I showed you what my potato chips look like for the large and the medium, and these both turned out okay, right? Like they turned out so that you can see them pretty well, and they look like they've healed in a good bit. But the ones that I did last night or yesterday morning, I guess it was, for these little chips are already pretty dried out by the time we get to us today. So that may be one of our factors that we consider, is that the little ones might need less time to harden off than some of the larger ones just because of the surface area to volume ratio of them. I'm going to try to just make these a little bit higher up than I did for the last set because these are a little bit smaller, so we don't need quite as much soil on top of them, but we're still going to bury them. The chips are going to practically be laid on the surface, but we'll still cover them with a small dusting of soil just to see. I mean, maybe they'll work. The cool thing about it is if that works, then you know that you don't really need much material to be able to regrow potatoes for you to eat and enjoy. Okay, so now here we're going to do these little guys. The buds still look pretty good on these, so I think I'm just going to go for it and we'll just see what happens, right? It's an experiment. That's what we do here in science. You do want the eye side up, and we'll just see how it goes. I don't know exactly how long it will take for these to make like functioning potatoes that you can harvest and eat. Usually at my house, I start them pretty much whenever I have potatoes that I just want to grow, and then I harvest them like mid to late summer, I do believe, is when I'm harvesting them. Okay, here we go. And all right, now I'm just going to take a little bit more of that soil to backfill. If you did have any like rotten spots in your potato, you want to make sure that you're cutting those out and not using those pieces in particular. Okay, so this is just a little bit less soil than I added to the other side. And over here, they're just going to get a very light sprinkling. That way they're all about an equal distance with the ratio of their size to the surface to see what we get. So now I'm just going to water this flat in, and then our weekly observations are just going to be the number that sprouted versus the number that didn't. We aren't treating this like a race. We're not seeing how many pounds of potatoes we get out of each one. We just want to know how much tissue is enough tissue to be able to get a new potato plant. I used about 6 potatoes to come up with all of that material that's in here. And the thing with potatoes is, since they're all clonally propagated anyways, there's not that much genetic variation in them. So the sample size still stands for 20 for this one. We just don't have multiple genomes, so I guess we are controlling for genetic diversity. Okay, thank you very much.